Hello and welcome to livealittlehigher.com. Today we will begin with the first Mishnah of chapter 1 of Pirkei Avot, where it says Moshe received the Torah from Sinai and transmitted it to Yoshua, and Yoshua to the elders to the prophets, and the prophets transmitted it to the men of the great assembly. They, the men of the great assembly, said three things: be deliberate in judgment, develop many disciples, and make a fence for the Torah. So Mishnah begins with the story of the Torah leadership. Here we start to understand where all this knowledge comes from. The basic emunah and faith of a Jew is to believe that God gave the Torah to Moshe at Mount Sinai. Like every God-fearing and believing Jew, this is the first concept that is taught to us, that the Torah was something given to us by God at Mount Sinai. So here, it's interesting to see that it says Moshe received the Torah. And what it's telling us is that there is a responsibility in leadership. Like when there's a leader, the leader has a very big responsibility, and his responsibility is to create other leaders. So from here we see that he didn't keep the knowledge to himself, and I am the big boss here and nobody else knows better than me. No, what the Torah is still telling us here is like, this is something that has to go from one generation to another generation to another generation, and in this way it has to continue. But the way to be able to do this, it has to be transmitted from one person to another. And from here we see how great of a leader Moshe was, because imagine, he received like this huge treasure that he was able to share with Yoshua, and Yoshua shared it with the elders, and so on. So from here we see the responsibility of keeping the Mesorah, of keeping the traditions of our Torah alive. And these people were truly the leaders of the Torah world in the transmission, which they infused with tremendous love and the importance of the values and the teachings of the Torah and the wisdom. So Moshe received the Torah from Sinai. It doesn't say that he received it from God. And that is something very important to understand. Because if it would say Moshe received the Torah from God, it would make God like a human. He would lower Hashem into our physicality, into our realm. But by saying that Moshe received the Torah from Sinai, what he's saying is that that Hashem is above everything. He's even bigger than Sinai. So we would think that the first step in the Torah would be the transmission, and this would be like God transmitted the Torah to Moshe. It doesn't say he transmitted it to Moshe. It says he received it from Sinai. So this received the Torah is very different than transmitting, because transmitting means that you get all the knowledge and you're able to give it to someone else, but you have all the knowledge. When it's saying here Moses received the Torah from Sinai, what it's using out here is it's different. What it's saying is he received the knowledge, but he couldn't grasp it all. Like whatever he was able to understand and grasp, that's what we got. And there's much, much more that we don't have the capacity to understand. That's why we connect to faith, because faith is to go above our knowledge, above our understanding. And when we don't know something, we don't understand that, we cannot. It's very hard for us to understand it. Then we're able to tap into faith, which is that we connect to something higher than ourselves. So here, Hashem chose Sinai as the geographical origin of the Torah, and he designated Moses as the ambassador to humanity. So the proof is in the Hebrew wording of how it calls Mount Sinai in Parashat Shemot. It is called Har HaElokim, the mountain of God. And by calling Moshe Ish HaElokim in Devarim, which means the man of God. So these two wordings of Mount Sinai and Moshe are alluding that really the Torah came from God. but it's not put in that way out of respect for the heightened state of Hashem that we're not going to be lowering down to our realm. So then the Mishnah tells us that Moses transmitted it to Yeshua. He transmitted what he received, what he understood, and from then on, then Yeshua transmitted it to the elders, and the elders transmitted it to the prophets, and then the prophets gave it to the men of the great assembly. So this teaches us that a teacher, the mission of a teacher, of a leader, is to impart his knowledge in its entirety. Like, we cannot teach halfway. Like, if I'm giving a shiur, I have to give you everything I know. And I don't know everything. I just know a certain amount. So my teacher always used to say, if you know Aleph, teach Aleph. That's your obligation. Like, if you know any little thing that you can give to someone else, you're obliged to give it. You're not supposed to keep it with yourselves. I remember when I was younger, in where I come from, like, you would ask a recipe of a cake from a lady, and the lady would give it to you not well given, or she would not give it to you. And then you would go and buy the eggs, the flour, the sugar. You would waste your time, and the thing was a disaster. And this is not the Torah way. The Torah way is, someone asks you for a recipe, you should give it. Now in Pesach, I lost my books, my Pesach books. And if it's not because I've given my recipes, I could have never gotten the recipes back. And when you give, you really you're receiving more than what you're giving. So the mission of the teacher is to impart his knowledge in its entirety, and the student's mission is to grasp all this knowledge. Like, if a teacher is giving of his time and his effort to give to another person his knowledge, then that other person should really try to grasp everything they're giving him. So when it talks about Moses, it says Moshe received, and we already said this. And then the men of the great assembly lived in the times of before the second temple. They flourished. It was 1,000 years after of the giving of the Torah, and it was a very tough time. It was a time of persecution, of exile, and a lot of the Mesorah was being lost, because a lot of all this Mishnah really is the oral Torah, so they had to put it into writing. So the Torah and the transmission was being weakened, and the leaders found it necessary to start giving advice to the people, so they would know how they should behave in certain moments of what was going on in their lives. And this Mishnah at the end tells us, be deliberate in judgment, develop many disciples, and make a fence for the Torah. So this is very interesting. The Maharal of Prague explains that these three advices that the men of the Great Assembly gave, these three things they said to the people, are connected to our Chokhmah, our Bina, and our Dat, our intellectual faculties. So Chokhmah is wisdom, is that first flash of insight. Bina is to understand that wisdom, and that is the knowledge that you acquire when you process all that information. So be deliberate or patient in judgment is this one is connected to the Chokhmah, to the wisdom. And for example, a judge cannot be bribed. He can't be biased on anything. He has to be completely taken apart from the situation and look at it from an external point. He cannot have feelings for any one of the two parties or anything. And he has to, when he makes a decision, he should be very calm. He should not take decisions in a rush. He should really think about them and analyze them and then come to the decision. And this also is connected to Mishpatim, which is the laws that make sense, that are like judicial laws, that like don't kill, don't steal, like they make sense. And then develop many students. This one is connected to Binah, to understanding, when a person teaches, he has to acquire more understanding of what he's teaching. Like, for example, now I'm teaching you Pirkei Avot. This is, I've always learned Pirkei Avot, but I've never taught it. So I have to acquire more understanding of the subject to be able to give it to you. And by giving it to you, I am acquiring more understanding also. So I'm giving you understanding and I'm acquiring understanding. And this one is connected to Avot, which are general mitzvahs like that Shabbat and Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, and in Pesach you don't eat bread, which we keep because it's our traditions, it's our Torah, we don't question them, this is the way it is, this is being Jewish, and this is what this one is connected to. So make a fence for the Torah is connected to our dat, to our knowledge. As you know, we first have wisdom, then we have understanding, and then it becomes our knowledge. And this dat, when we have knowledge, it helps us not to fall. And it's also connected to the hukim, which are supra-rational mitzvahs that we cannot understand. They're not understandable, like eat kosher. Why should I eat kosher? Because Hashem wants to. Then we can find certain things that make sense. But the truth is that we cannot find an accurate reason why we cannot eat a pig. So, for example, also it says that Torah law forbids to cook the calf in its mother's milk. This is the mitzvah. We don't cook, and from here we derive that we don't cook meat in milk, or we don't eat a cheese hamburger. It's forbidden for a Jew, or we cannot cook it, we cannot eat it, we cannot benefit from it. But it never said that you cannot eat chicken or fowl, any bird that you can eat, duck or turkey, with milk. It doesn't say that. But the rabbis decided that they were going to put this law that we cannot eat chicken with meat, with milk, like we cannot eat a piece of chicken with cheese. It's forbidden, but it's not from the Torah, it's from the rabbis. So what they're saying is that we put certain fences, we put extra careful, the rabbis put extra care in certain mitzvot so we would not get confused and we would not fall. For example, veal in those days and today is very similar to chicken, and this is why they made this decision, because people would get confused and they would end up eating the veal with the cheese. So these hukim, these supra-rational laws, which are beyond our understanding, are really what brings us to be knowledgeable and live in the right way. So at the end of the Mishnah, it says there's three things that the great man of the assembly gave. The number 3 is very important in the Torah, and it's a complete entity. And here we see that a remedy consists of 3 parts. 2 are opposite extremes, and 1 is intermediate part that joins with those elements that form an unified whole. So, for example, we had 3 forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Yaakov. We have Chokhmah, Bina, Dat, which are our intellectual faculties. And in ourselves, we have our minds, we have our body, and we have our emotional part. So everything is in 3s. And an example it gives us is, for example, a house needs to be fortified. So in the outside, you're going to make sure you have a good roof, you're going to have gutters that will help your house to be sturdy and strong. Inside, you would get rid of any element that would be dangerous for you, like things that are flammable that can make a fire. And then you would also brace the structure of the house. So these are 3 dimensions for solutions. And the wisdom of our sages is practical advice for our day-to-day life, for our day-to-day experiences with the knowledge of the Torah and the understanding. So I leave you here. I hope you have a beautiful and blessed week. And remember, live a little higher. Thank you.